Hello. Today I'd like to talk about ADHD and really three keys to understanding what ADHD actually is. First off, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. That is when people basically are all over the place and seem like they have a hard time to focus. Especially common in children. You see it all the time where they're hyperactive, hard to focus. So really understanding what's going on with these kids is useful in how to help them manage their behaviors and thoughts and emotions more effectively. So first thing is, ADHD is a cognitive issue. And by a cognitive issue, I mean they do not get emotional, they're not sad or happy. It's not about emotions. Also, ADHD is not about behavior. Even though a lot of times they're very hyperactive, that is the result of having a mind that just takes in so much information. So here's a way to think about that, is when someone is talking to someone, normally you focus in on what you're talking about. But when someone has ADHD, they don't have this focus, they have this focus. They focus in on everything. Now here, full disclosure, I have ADHD. I have ADHD, I've had it my whole life, was hyperactive, stuttered as a kid, had lots of problems. I still have ADHD. As we sit here and I'm talking and trying to present information, I hear noise in the background, I see out the window, I take in a lot of information and I have to let it go. Part of it is I'm able to realize that most of the information that I take in isn't really helpful to understanding the situation. It's not a priority that needs to be addressed. So when I think of ADHD, the first thing that you really need to recognize is it's how someone processes information. And it's not this, it's this. So they're taking in so much information that saying pay more attention is sort of like telling someone who's doing a full-out sprint, run faster. It doesn't really help, because you're telling them to do more of what they're already doing too much of. And so we're not really looking at sort of the answers or how to address the problems, but really what it is to understand. And so the first key to understanding is realizing it's a thinking issue. It's not a behavioral issue. It's not an acting out or emotional issue. It's a thought issue. Second thing to really consider is that there's different types of ways that people actually are impacted by having this wide focus. Some of them have too many priorities. Some of them are bored and just bounce from thing to thing. Some of them have a hard time transitioning from one thing to the next. So there's a whole lot of different ways people actually can be inattentive. One of the things that I've created to really understand this is a picture of the different types of ADHD that I'm aware of. So if you look closely, one is sort of information overload. They're just taking too much information, don't know how to manage it. A lack of focus. They're looking all over the place. They don't know what's important or not. Difficulties, concentrating. They can't pay attention. They're easily overwhelmed. So one thing gets to another and all of a sudden they're way overwhelmed. They have too many priorities. They start doing one thing and then another, and then all of a sudden everything is important, and so they get nothing done. Sometimes they have black and white thinking, where it's like, if I can't do this, then I have to do this. Or if I can't do this, if I can't be good, then I'm bad at it, I'm not going to do it. Or they can be bored. They can start something, get carried away, and all of a sudden it's like, this is boring, I want to do something else. And then this gets boring, and they gloss over and they really don't engage in the process. So there's a lot of different ways that people can have ADHD, and it can impact their way of thinking. For me, I am really good at concentrating when I focus in. I'm fairly good at doing transitions, but sometimes I do get bored. This is really readily available in high school. I played music. And I loved to sight read, and I was very good at it. I could sit down and play a musical piece that I had never seen before and play it fairly well. However, about the fourth time I played it, I started getting bored, was making mistakes that I shouldn't be, and wasn't really focusing as hard as I needed to get better. Just one of those things that took me a long time to figure out what was going on. So there's different types of how kids and adults have inattention and how they manage that. The last thing, the third key. So first one, it's really a thinking process. Second one, there's different types of thinking processes that impact how they act. And the third one is that when kids act out, when they're oppositional defiant, when they're behaviorally impulsive, when they're emotional, those are not ADHD issues. Those are the symptoms that develop from having that thinking process. So it's a secondary piece. Imagine it this way. Say someone had tacks in their pants, and when they sat down, those tacks poked them. And you basically told that person, you need to sit down and quit wiggling around all the time. That's a secondary impact from the tacks. And they stand up, they don't feel it. But when they sit down, all of a sudden they have this thing that is very noticeable and it impacts their behavior. If you don't address the tacks issue, sitting down isn't going to help. And so one of the things is to recognize that with ADHD, there's a lot of behavioral issues that are a symptom of their thinking process. And so you really want to look at how to change some of those thinking processes and develop new sets of skills to help them bring this focus back down into so they can focus in on what's important. So again, the three keys to really understanding ADHD. One, it's a thinking issue. It's not an emotional issue, and it's not a behavioral issue or a relationship issue. Those are secondary aspects. Two, there are different types of thinking issues that develop from ADHD. Some have inattention, they just can't pay attention to what's important. Some don't know what to prioritize. Many different ways, and it's really important to understand that. And the third one is that when someone is acting out or being emotional, that's a symptom of the ADHD, but not actually part of the ADHD itself. Hope this helps. I'm looking forward to kind of discussing some of the ways to address some of these thinking issues and behavioral issues that are a result of ADHD. Thank you. Talk to you soon.